Hi there and welcome. I'm Rebecca Weaver. We're going to divide polynomials today. So first up, some fraction addition. So we're going to kind of reinforce some concepts that we learned earlier. So here we go. If we have 2 over 4 plus 1 over 4, what we do is we keep the same denominator and add the tops. And if we didn't have the same denominator, remember we would have to get a common denominator, but we're not going to deal with that right now. So when we put this together, we keep that same denominator, add the top, so we get 3 over 4. Let's look at this backwards. If I had 2 plus 1 over 4, I could bust that fraction apart or distribute that 4 and say that the 2 needs to be divided by the 4 and the 1 needs to be divided by the 4 because they both were. So we're going to put letters in this. So I wanted to go through this with numbers first. If A, B, and C are numbers and C is not 0, we can say that A over C plus B over C means that we keep the same denominator and add the top. Also, if we are given A plus B over C, we can bust that fraction into A over C plus B over C. Now this is going to be useful to us. So one of them is putting the fraction together. The other is busting the fraction apart. So here's what we have. So I'm going to be using those phrases as we go through our division. So let's play. If I have 42x squared minus 14x all over 7, I can bust that fraction apart, saying that it's 42x squared over 7 minus, watch your signs on this, 14x over 7. I'm going to do a little canceling on the front end so I don't have to reduce on the back end. Go ahead and cancel here. 7 goes into both of those, goes into that 6, goes into that once. Nothing to do with my x's. 7 goes into 14 2 times. 7 goes into 7 goes into 7 one time. And I'll end up with 6x squared minus 2x. Next, I have this minus 20a to the 4th plus 15 all over 5a. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to bust apart that fraction. So I'll have negative 20a to the 4th over 5a plus 15 over 5a, taking it one bite at a time. I'm going to reduce that fraction on the front end. So 5 goes into 24 times, 5 goes into 5 one time, and then the a's also will cancel a little bit, but I'll do that in a minute. 5 goes into 15 three times, into 5 one time. So writing that down, I'll have negative 4, and then one of my a's will cancel, so I'll get negative 4a cubed plus, and then I just have to leave it as 3 over a. The a didn't do anything on that back fraction, and that's simplified as far as it'll go. Sometimes they're going to give you a division problem and it'll look like this. Just go, I'm not going to do it like that. I'm going to write it just like this. It means the whole thing divided by negative 8x. So I have that I'm going to bust this fraction, and when I bust that fraction, I'll get 48x squared y cubed all over negative 8x. Watching these signs, I have minus 16xy all over negative 8x. Being really deliberate about my signs on that back fraction. You could just go ahead and write down plus because you can notice that the negative will make it a plus. I'm going to in a minute. But first up, I just am being real specific. So 8 goes into both of these. 8 goes into 48 6 times, 8 one time. 8 goes into both of those. Negative 8, I guess you could say even. 2 and 1 here. So let's see what happens. I'll have negative 6. And then my x's, one of them will cancel and leave in the y there. And then I'll end up with negative 6xy cubed. Looking at that second term, that's going to be a plus 2. One of the x's cancels, it goes away, so I don't have any x's left, and it's just plus 2y. So let's look at some long division. This is some fancy long division that we're getting ready to do because we need to divide x squared plus 9x plus 20 by x plus 5. Let's write down our long division symbol. I'll put down my terms where they need to go. All right. I need to look at x plus 5 into x squared plus 9x. So x goes into x squared, x times. Since I have two terms, I'm going to put it over that second term so I can keep my place here. I do just like I normally do in long division. I will multiply. So x times x is x squared, and then x times 5 is 5x. So I multiply. Then I'm going to subtract. Be sure that you subtract both terms. I have to subtract the whole thing. When I do, the x squareds go away, leaving me with 4x. Next thing I need to do is drop that next term. So I'll have 4x plus 20. I need to divide the x plus 5 into that 4x plus 20, so that'll be a plus 4. I need to multiply, so 4 times x is 4x, and 4 times 5 is 20. Next thing I'll need to do is subtract. I'll get a 0, meaning that I'm done and this came out even. Your answer would be x plus 4. All right, let's do another one. We're going to do this long division. I'm going to put my answer in that little box because it gets long here. I need to write this out, put in what I'm going to be dividing into down here. Notice that I wanted to make sure I had a representative for each term. So I have an x cubed, an x squared, an x, and a constant. Notice that I put in that 0x squared as a placeholder. That's totally legal. 0 times x squared is just 0, so I can add 0 to anything I want. I'm going to take x minus 3 and divide it into this 2x cubed minus 6x minus 36. First thing I need to do is look at x into 2x cubed. That's going to be 2x squared. I'll then multiply, and I'll get, whoops, let me change that to a 3. Okay, it's like magic. Then the minus 3 times that 2x squared will be minus 6x squared. Watch these signs. It's really easy to make a sign mistake. Then what you'll need to do is subtract. So we have to change everybody's sign. So it's going to be 2x cubed minus 2x cubed. Well, that's 0. But then I've got a minus 6x squared. That is then going to be plus. So after I bring down my minus 6x, I will do x into 6x squared. X into 6x squared is just going to be plus 6x. Then I'll multiply, and I'll get minus 18x for that second term. Remember that I need to then subtract, which gets really tricky because, you've got your 6x squared minus 6x squared. Well, that's gone. What about this negative 6x? And then you see that minus minus on that 18x. That's going to be a plus 18x. That means you are going to end up with a plus 12x. So x goes into 12x plus 12 times. I'm going to multiply. Oh, bring down my term. Sorry. Then I'll multiply x times 12, and then negative 3 times the 12. Then I will subtract. I'll get a 0 when I subtract. And then my answer is 2x squared plus 6x plus 12. And that's all we have for that one. These are very long problems. So if you have trouble, be sure and email me. My email is rweaver10@alaska.edu. And have a fabulous day.